Hello, today I'd like to show you how to make a fun little project. This is a lotus bag and I'm going to start out with 2 fat quarters and some cord. So 2 fat quarters might be 2 that coordinate together. One's going to be for the outside of the bag and one's going to be for the inside of the bag, and you're going to see both fabrics, so they both need to be nice fabrics. So here I've just laid out 2 fat quarters on my board. I've actually ironed them nice and flat, and I've placed them right sides together, and I'm going to cut from those, I'm going to cut 17-inch squares. So my fat quarter, which will be 18 inches one way and about 21, 22 the other way, is plenty big enough. And just using the markings on my board to be able to get the square the size I'm looking for, I'm going to trim off one side, and then I'm going to come along to the 17-inch mark on the board and I'm going to trim the other side. Now I don't need that piece, and now I'm going to turn this around, still keeping the 2 pieces together so that they're nicely lined up, and I'm going to do the same in the other direction. So I'm going to trim this side, then come along the 17 inches and trim the other side. So now I have 2 already together 17-inch squares that I now need to sew together. But just before I do that, I'm going to pop them to one side and take one of these leftover pieces of material, and I'm just going to cut 2 little strips to make the little ends of the cord out of. So for those I need 2 strips 1.5 inches wide and 2.5 inches long. So I'll cut the 2 1.5 bits. Now today I'm using some very delicious fabrics, because this has probably got a Japanese origin with the lotus arrangement. I've used some Japanese flavoured fabrics, and today I'm using some fabrics from Kona Bay, who always do such wonderful Japanese themed fabrics. And I think the lotus thing probably comes from the fact that these bits sitting here, which I'll show you how to make this, form what looks like a lotus flower. So now I'm going to go to my machine and I'm going to sew these 2 squares right sides together all the way around, but I'm going to leave about a 3-inch gap on one of the sides so that I can turn it out and press it. So I'm just using a 1/4 inch seam. I've just got my 1/4 inch foot on, and I'm just going to stop and start with a little reverse. Leave my needle in at the corner to pivot, turn that round, and then I'm going to sew all the way around till I get to nearly back to the beginning. So here I'm on the last bit of the straight round. And I'm just going to leave my 3-inch gap here and just tie off my ends. And now I'm going to trim away the little corners. Just clip off those corners close to the stitching, but don't cut into the stitching, and this will just help when you're turning it out the right way for the corners to pop out nicely. And now I need to turn that right sides out. And then just pop your little corners out nice and pointy by popping your hand inside the little hole that we've turned it through. You can just reach in and pop those little corners out. Now if they're being a little bit stubborn, you can get a little bit like this one is. You can get a pin and you can just help pin that out from the outside. Just pull that out just gently. Don't pull too hard because you'll pop a hole in it. So do that with all 4 corners, and then we're going to press that so that your seams are nice and flat, and where the opening is. So it's a good idea just to run your fingers along the seams. That helps them sit nicely when it comes to the pressing side of things. And then we're going to press the opening so that 1/4 inch sits in. And it sits nice and smoothly, and you're going to press all the way along those edges. Just make sure they're sitting nice and pushed out at the seam so that you get a nice edge all the way along. So now you've got this nice two-sided square. While we've got the iron going, with your 2 little bits that we've cut for the cord ends, lay them down right sides down and just fold back 1/4 inch along the short side of each end of each piece. And we might as well sew those while we're here. So now I'd like to fold those right sides together and just sew down the side seams. And I can feed them in as we go. So sew down both sides. Again, just with your 1/4 inch seam allowance, take them out, trim them, clip them apart, and then just again clip those little corners so that when you turn it out the right way, the corners will be nice and easy for you. They're a little bit fiddly to turn, but not impossible. And you might find something just help you pop those corners out. Like my trusty scissors here. And don't forget that we've just got to close up this little gap that we left for turning. So you could either slip stitch that by hand, or I'm just going to quickly pop mine in the machine and just sew really close to the edge along there. So now I've got my nice double-sided square of fabric, and we need to decide which is our outside of the bag and which is going to be the inside with the little corners showing. So I would like this to be the outside, so I want to lay it with the outside facing up, and I'm going to use the markings on my board. I need to flip back the corners, and on this size square we're going to flip them back 6 inches. So I'm going to go 6 inches up here, and I'm going to pop a pin in there just to hold that, and I'm going to turn it round, and I'm going to do the same thing on each of the 4 corners and just pop a pin in just to hold it in place. And there we've got our 4 pins in ready. So now what we need to do is stitch along 1/2 inch inside on each of those corners. So now I'm just going to sew 1/2 inch along these folded edges, 1/2 inch in from the folded edge. And I'm going to do that on all 4 of the corners. So now I've sewn 1/2 inch in on each of those 4 corners. I can take those pins out, we won't need those anymore. And now we're going to thread the cord that's going to work as the drawstring cord. So I've got 2 bits of cord here and a safety pin, because I had cut my length of cord in half. and I'm just going to thread that through those 4 corners all the way around until I come back to where I started. So I've threaded my cord all the way around, and I've still got the safety pin attached to it, and I'm just going to pop that safety pin through both ends so that it can't disappear, because now we need to put the second piece of cord through in exactly the same way, but starting on the opposite side of the bag, because we want to have 2 cords that pull, and so you need to start the other side and go all the way around, ending up back over there. I've just finished threading the cord. I've got my pin holding the 2 ends at that end, and at this end I've just come out the other end, and so now I've got these 2 ends. Now you could just tie a knot, but I quite like to pop a little end on like I put on my bag here. So these ends that we were sewing earlier, I just need to slip those 2 inside there and take that to the sewing machine and just stitch across. Now I usually double stitch across, that holds the cord in quite well. You could of course knot it first and pop the knot inside, but I quite like the little flat end. So I've gone over it and then I've reversed back again, and now I'll just do the other end as well. And this just gives a nice finish to the bag. It gives you something to grab hold of when you want to pull those strings up. So here we have the bag. It's sitting nice and flat, so that if you want to keep things in it, you can open it up nicely to use it. The outside is the nice bright fabric, and then by having the 2 strings in there like that, if you pull both those up, that bag is just going to sit quite nicely. These are going to look like lotus petals, and you've got a lovely little bag that would make a perfect gift. It's a really good little sewing bag to carry a little project around in, and really just a lot of fun. So just to recap on that, I've used 2 fat quarters, one for the inside, one for the outside, and you'll see both fabrics, so they need to coordinate nicely. And I've used a total of 2.5 yards of cord, which I cut in half, so 2 pieces 1¼ yards each, and I've sewn them together and popped all that in. Now another option would be, using the same amount of fabric, would be to have your squares and to make 4 smaller bags. So starting with your 17-inch square that you did for your bigger bag, you could now cut that into 4 pieces so that they're just smaller squares, and make the same thing but a small version of it. And here I've made a couple already, and I've used obviously the same fabrics, because when you've cut it in you get 4, but I've done one out one way and one out the other way, so that you get a little bit of a difference in how they look. So you could either make the 4 smaller bags with 8.5-inch squares, or the one larger bag 17-inch square. And if you're looking to make the smaller ones, you just need half as much cord, and when you're folding your corners in, you just fold them in 3 inches instead of the 6 inches that we did on the larger one. So have fun with that project. Let me know how you go. Thank you.